Hey guys, it's Emmy Ray with Iron Pine Homestead, and I am so excited that you're joining us for the Beginner Homestead Mindset. I hope you enjoy this course, and as we go through, I want you to utilize not only the mini course itself, but the additional blueprint that we have added to help you shift your mindset from this hustle culture style to a more slow living, intention setting life. So, again, welcome to Iron Pine Homestead. I am Emmy Ray, and alongside my partner Tomas and our beautiful family, we're building a life that feels aligned with who we are slower, more intentional, rooted in what actually works for us. But it didn't start that way. In those first few months, things felt uncertain, messy, and honestly, very overwhelming. And we're still figuring things out as we go. But at the beginning, we were questioning everything and having to unlearn a lot. But the one thing that we were learning was to trust ourselves in a way that we had never done before. And that is exactly what led us here to creating this mini course because we realized that this is the lifestyle and it's not reserved for a select few, but it's built by step, choice by choice mindset shifts. And if you're here listening right now, there's a reason, and we truly believe that you can build a life that feels good to you and one that aligns with your values, your pace, and your vision. Because this course isn't about doing things perfectly or thinking that you have to do more. It's about trusting yourself and creating from where you are, which is the foundation of that slow living mindset because you're building that life. It didn't come in a pretty package, but it is something, while intangible, you can do anywhere, in any place, in any space. I just want to be the first to welcome you to your homestead. Because again, we don't believe you need those hundreds of acres or a background in farming to build that dream life. We're going to show you how to build a slower, simpler life with what you have, one small step at a time. Because homesteading isn't a tangible thing. It's a mindset, a lifestyle, and a way of living. So take a deep breath and let it out. Because before we go any further, I want you to just arrive in this moment. There's no rushing, no pressure to keep up, no expectations of getting everything perfect, just you being here. Because the life you're craving, the slower mornings, the intentional days, the feeling of actually living instead of constantly catching up, that life doesn't start someday. That starts right now. And I want to say something that you might not believe yet. But you're not behind. You're not late. You haven't missed your chance to start. And even if you've been thinking about homesteading for years, or even if you feel like everybody else is already seasons ahead of you, you're exactly where you need to be. Because homesteading isn't something you fall behind in, it's something you're choosing to begin. And today, you're beginning it. And I want you to just appreciate the beginning because that's just as important as any other seasons ahead of you. Now, I bet if I asked you what homesteading really is, your answer would be different than mine. You might say that it's having the acres, the livestock, the gardens, might have a pantry full of canning goods, things like that. But what if I told you that yes, it could be growing food or having a small livestock or making something from scratch? But what if I told you it's way more than that? Because homesteading is not about doing everything, it's about doing what matters. It's about choosing intention over convenience, the presence over pressure, sustainability over speed, and it's about learning how to live in a way that feels aligned instead of constantly trying to keep up. Because this is an identity shift. Not something to add to your life, but something that changes how you live your life. And I want us to let go of the all or nothing mindset because all or nothing thinking is what is keeping you stuck. And a lot of times it sounds like if I can't do it all, then why would I start? Or if I don't have the land yet, I'll just wait. Or, maybe if I can't do it perfectly, I won't do it at all. But homesteading doesn't work like that because it's built slowly, imperfectly, and over time. And every single small step you take counts. Homesteading is learning skills, it's learning to live with intention, it's learning the ebbs and flow of nature, and it's learning to slow down where you can. Because this hustle culture has really gotten our mindsets shifted into always being on the go. And before we get into the full mindset shift here, we need to redefine that you don't need the hundreds of acres. You can start where you are. The biggest thing that people think of when they think of homesteading is the gardens. So, start a container garden. If you don't have the space, start where you can. Start a raised bed, start a windowsill garden. And if you can or you have the room, go ahead and start the in ground garden. But it's all about starting where you are and in what season you're in. Because, like I said, you don't need to start with the homesteading land. You don't need animals. You don't need a perfect setup because homesteading isn't a location, it's a lifestyle. And you can begin in your small apartment, a busy season of life, or a place that doesn't look anything like your dreams yet because you're still living this out. Now, here is where we are really going to shift that mindset because hustle culture teaches you that your worth is tied to your productivity, that rest has to be earned. Slowing down is falling behind, that doing less somehow means you are less. And when you carry that into homesteading, you're turning something beautiful into something overwhelming because you feel like you have to do it all, learn it all, have it all figured out. And the real reason you're feeling stuck is because of the mindset and because you're getting stuck in other people's expectations. Now, most people think that they're stuck because of their circumstances. I don't have the time. I don't have the land. I don't have the resources yet. But that's not actually what's keeping you stuck. What's keeping you stuck is the way you've been taught. You've been taught to move fast, to do more, to always be approving, optimizing, achieving, and the way of thinking doesn't just disappear when you decide you want a slower life. It'll follow you until you understand that hustle culture and the doing it all, learning it all, and having it all figured out is not actually the way to go. Instead, we have to redefine what productivity is because this is one of the biggest shifts you're going to make. And right now, productivity probably feels like that getting it more done, being efficient, checking things off of a list. But if productivity looks like that, you're not enjoying the moment. You're looking at the perfection over the progress. And you're not really taking the time to learn as we grow because we're building this. It's not prepackaged. So, what if I told you productivity actually looks like nourishing yourself or caring for your space, creating something with your hands, whether it's a garden or building something from scratch, cooking something from scratch, just doing something textile for yourself? And what if it was being present in your day instead of being present with the next thing? What if doing less but doing it with attention was actually more valuable? Because slowing down does not mean you're lazy. It means you're just choosing to live differently. It means you're stepping out of urgency and into awareness. It means you are no longer letting your life pass you by while you rush through it. Slowing down is not about doing nothing, it is about doing things fully. And a super simple way to begin shifting that mindset is living with your season. Because homesteading, we're learning to live with the season and not just necessarily the gardening season, but also our seasons in life. Because right now, you're in a season and your homesteading journey needs to fit that. Not someone else's and not the versions you see online, but yours. Because some seasons are slower, Some seasons are fuller, and some require more rest, but all of them are valid. And you can still live with intention no matter what that season of your life is. And of course, yes, learning to live in the season of your garden or of nature is part of that if that's the route you're going. But it's so much deeper because it's a cycle and you don't need to change everything overnight. And in fact, you shouldn't because the lifestyle is built small with consistent shifts. You might start with cooking one meal from scratch every week. Maybe it's spending time outside or becoming more aware of your own rhythm. And while these things may seem small now, they are setting the foundation of everything because instead of trying to overhaul your life, you're building that rhythm moving through your days, feeling grounded, intentional, and it's feeling sustainable because that's where the real shift happens. It's not a big dramatic change, but it's how you show up daily. And it's starting small. Now, depending on your lifestyle and depending on your season, what we like to do here is we like to create a skill stacking system. What I call it, though, is the rule of one, or RU, where you pick one skill that you're learning that fits with your season, and then you can build on that once you feel confident and comfortable in implementing that in your day to day without it feeling overwhelming. Because if you're trying to throw everything on at once, it's going to be too much. So start with one. Rule of one. RU. Pick your RU. Maybe today you're starting with food preservation. Maybe you want to learn how to make an herbal remedy. Maybe you're cooking and baking bread or baking something from scratch. Maybe it is growing a garden. Or maybe you have the ability to raise some sort of livestock. Pick one thing that you can start now and build and skill stack on. For us here at the homestead, our RU is we are learning to grow our food first. We're learning how to get our gardens established, how and what we're actually going to grow and use throughout the seasons. And then once we feel that this season is getting to where we are confident, we can start moving to the next one, which for us is food preservation. That would be our next skill stack. But right now, for our season and our homestead, growing food is what fits with our life. We're not trying to cram everything in at once. And if that's not where you're at yet, maybe it's something so small as starting a craft. Maybe it's learning to sew or knit. Or maybe it's learning how to just ferment food because that's a very easy thing to do and it doesn't take you very much time. And honestly, the skill choices are endless, but it's all about picking that one thing that fits your current season and starting there. And while you're learning that skill, you're also remembering that you're not going to become a master at it because you're slowly building this life and you're slowly learning that skill. But you know what you're doing when you learn that skill? Is you are showing up with intention, which is again the root of what homesteading mindset is all about, is living your day with intention. Which I don't know about you guys, but I have felt burnout before. And that is exactly what we want to avoid for you. Is that burnout, which is why we look at the rule of one, aka RU, and we pick that one thing that fits with your season. And then we celebrate those small wins that you have. Maybe you started a seed garden and you have germination happening. Maybe you made something from scratch today. Maybe you just got outside for a minute and just breathed in some fresh air. Those are all wins. You showing up for yourself and living intentionally is a win. And even if you hit bumps along the way, something I tell our boys is if you learn, you didn't lose because we're not going to be perfect. Because homesteading isn't about perfection, it's about process. And you're making new small daily habits that you can later stack on. And you're learning small daily habits that will help you continue to grow and continue to change your mindset for maybe someday you have the property with the acreage, or whatever your goals is around homesteading. That is exactly where you are now, is you are starting that small daily habit and taking those small steps towards becoming more self-sufficient and living with intention. So if you're here, let's start planning out our first year. I know that sounds like a lot, but we don't have to complicate it. Maybe for your spring season, we're starting a garden. Maybe for summer, you're learning to harvest it. Fall is trying to preserve the food. And winter is planning your next garden and learning what you could and could not do from the previous season, or learning how you can start next season, because it's all about starting within your season. And let's make it simple. This week, even just choose one thing to slow down, choose one thing to do with intention. Choose one thing to create instead of consume, and then build that into your year one plan. Maybe it's you want to get outside more. So in the spring, you're going to be outside at least 5 minutes a day. In summer, maybe you bump that up, fall, etc. In the wintertime, maybe it is finding something to get out and network that you don't necessarily have to be outside if you live somewhere with a lot of snow. But there are ways that you can start breaking down your single rue and intention into the seasons, and then break it down to the day. Because if you look at this, year one, starting a garden, learning to harvest, preserve the food, plan and learn, that looks so much simpler than if I said in the spring, I'm going to start a seed garden. I'm going to start this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to get this done. And I'm going to become a master at this. And then in the summer, I'm going to do XYZ PDQ. You would get overwhelmed. So just a simple 1 or 2 words, 3 if you need a filler word in there, something simple to keep you on track throughout your year, but base it off of whatever rue you are choosing. So before we end, I want you to take a second, because your homestead should be as unique as you, even if you're starting in that small, tiny apartment, because this is your space. You can go your pace. You can do it in your season, because this is your vision. And it is always good to set goals and have intentions, but what are actions that you can take today that aren't going to overwhelm you in your season? So I want us to pause and take a breath and let all of the information you have learned in this settle for a second. You don't need to have everything figured out. You just need to begin, because homesteading is not something you arrive at. It's something you're choosing again and again every day. And just visualize how you want to implement everything you learned here today into small actionable steps. And what is one skill that you can start today, even if it's just planning? All right, you guys, that is it for the mindset shift. And be on the lookout, because we are planning on doing some more mindset around the homestead content and courses. And if you have any feedback, feel free to reach out to us on any of our social media, because this is the first time we're doing this, and we would love to grow and learn what you guys think. But as we end here today, I just want to remind you that this is a lifestyle shift, and it is not meant to happen overnight. However, you can take that first step towards it today by just being here. And once again, thank you so much for joining us. I hope this was helpful, because we really want to give back to you guys just as much as you guys have been supporting us. And just remember, this is your first step towards getting out of that hustle culture and into that slower, more intentional way of living.